Hi, it's Jared from Strongroots Farm. We're back with another episode, and today we're going to be talking about stocker cattle, or should you be raising stockers on your small farmer homestead? Now, if you don't understand what that means, there are basically three classifications in the big agricultural system of cattle, or three time periods. You can do all three of these on a farm, you can do two of three, or typically most people choose one of the three sections. These three from beginning to end are a cow-calf operation, which is where you have the mom cow and the bulls, and you're dropping baby calves. The middle section that we're going to talk about today is referred to as stockers. This is cattle from the time they are weaned, typically 400 to 500 pound calves, up until they are ready to go to a finish facility, typically 800 to 900 pounds. That middle section is considered stockers. And then the final section would be considered fat cattle, or cattle that are going to a feedlot, which is, they can be as low as 750, 700 sometimes, but most of the time between 800, 900 pounds until butcher weight, somewhere between 13 to 1500 pounds. Which means you would end up with something similar to what you're seeing behind me as they're laying down in the shade. Cattle that are being prepared either to go to a feedlot or, in our case, a freezer. These are stockers, where you buy in calves, typically at 400 to 500 pounds from a local farm or a stockyard, sale barn, and you're gonna raise them out to either turn them into beef eventually or send them back to the market to go to a feedlot, whereas you would hold the profit for the weight that you put on them while they were on your farm. So this video is coming from viewer questions asking if the best way to get started, if you're new as a beginner, is this the scenario that you should start in? Buying stockers and raising stockers. So I'm going to take you through it all today. We're talking mostly about small farms, small farmers, homestead. You're looking to get into the beginning, get into cattle, stockers. We'll talk about all that today. Stick around, I'll give you all the details. Welcome back to the farm. Thanks for joining us today as we talk about this. I want to really address this because I've had so many questions. We're going to get these guys up. Some of them are girls, actually. And that's the first thing is it could be heifers or steers, males or females, could even be bull calves for that matter, that we're raising and why you're raising them. So we're getting them up here. We're going to move. Let's go. Come on. We're going to move on to a next paddock here, get them to move on. These calves, we have one there that is about 500, 550, all the way up to about, I've got one that's right at 1,200 pounds because this is our end. Now we've got new calves up at the barn, which is the reason we're gonna move them back up because we have some new 4 weights that we're gonna introduce, put them in. Some of these will be butchered this winter, and then they'll continue. This is our fat herd essentially that we're gonna use for beef. So every one of these will eventually become beef in our freezer or somebody else's freezer. Now with that, that's not a traditional stocker method because typically a standard agricultural titled stocker operation would buy calves about that size or smaller and raise them to about the white-faced one here that you see, take it back to the market. Sometimes they only put 200 pounds. They buy them at 450, take them back at 650, and they're looking to gain a profit based off of the weight that they've added to them on the market. What we have, as we're moving these calves, is actually a stocker to fat operation, where we're buying within this herd here, specifically today. We're buying those calves at 400, I like to buy 450, 500, and then keep them all the way to butcher. So technically, I'm going over 2 of those industries. I'm in a stocker industry and the fat industry. Now we do this because our main goal here is to raise grass-fed beef for people for their freezer. So why would you choose one or another? What's the disadvantages? Should you do this? Is this the best method as a beginner, as starting out? Let's talk about each of these because there's risk and reward in each one of these sectors. So we'll start with the 2 others besides stockers first because I will knock them out and get them out of the way. The cow-calf operation. The risk is obviously calving. You have calves and they get sick or they die, or do they breed with your bull? There's lots of risks involved with a calving operation. The other things that are easier with a calving operation versus this is I don't have to focus as much on pounds per day gain. As long as I keep my cows, excuse me, in good condition, and we get the breeding times right, and I have a protected way to protect my calves, I'm producing a product that the market needs. Smithfield and the other Cargills and those companies, they haven't figured out how to raise calves, take calves from mom, born, and raise them healthily in a barn yet. If they would, they wouldn't need small farmers like us. So the cow-calf operation is still a good industry because we're providing the market with something that they cannot do without land. But of course, land's expensive. There's lots of risk there. Having lots of cows has problems. The next one is the fat cattle industry. So the fat cattle industry has its risks, and mainly it's due to money. So the inputs on the fat cattle, you either have to raise grain, which means you have lots of equipment and millions of dollars, and you're raising your own grain, and you fatten those cattle on grain if you're looking to do it like the industry, or you have to have quite a bit of pasture land to raise them on grass. And so now you are raising a product on grass, gaining weight using acreage, that if it dies, it's gonna be risky and cost you a lot of money in a fattening operation, which we have here. Now, typically once they get past 400 or 500 pounds, the risk of death just because is pretty low. You'd have to have a pretty rampant sickness or have one eat something poisonous. There is risk, but it seems to be lower once that calf gets past 450. But ultimately, there's a lot of cost involved in the fattening operation, and that puts most small farmers out of that industry. They're not looking to buy 700 and 800 pound cows, putting them just on grass or in grain. If they're paying for it, it's very expensive, and feeding them out. They don't have a barn. Barns are expensive. You need a $200,000 barn with concrete floors if you're gonna make it in that game, and that's just the beginner size. All right, so let's talk about stockers. Some of the main risks and trouble I've had in this section of the industry is finding good quality calves at a good price. The stocker industry right now is really hard because cattle or calves are very high, considerably from the last 20 years. Now, there's value there, and you can argue that if they would never get that high if there wasn't value in those animals. But really, if you've got a cow-calf operation started right now, you were able to buy those cows or raise them on your farm before the market went up, the cow-calf operation is paying fairly well right now. But because market prices are high, that's a really negative factor on this stocker sell as starting out as a stocker. The second problem with finding calves as for stockers is you don't really know what you're gonna get, especially if you're buying from a sale barn. They don't really tell you everything. You don't know the guy you're buying from, and they could have immunizations that you don't want. They could have been on grain and you want grass-fed. They could have been on grass and say that they have grain and they're tempered to grain, but you want to be grain-fed. There's all kinds of things. You don't really know exactly what you're buying. It's not exactly like buying a car with a warranty. You're buying this thing and bringing it home, and it could die 3 days later, and it's all on you as the buyer, not on the guy who sold it to you. The third problem, let's say that you find some good calves and you buy them from multiple people or multiple different farms when you go to the sale barn. They could have been good calves when they went to the sale barn and came off of a farm. The farmer prior to you, cow-calf, could have been an excellent guy who did an excellent job. But when you start intermixing calves from multiple different farms, it's kind of like sending your healthy child to kindergarten. They come home sick after 2 weeks. And sometimes that can be a problem in the stocker industry if you're not going to use a lot of immunizations or take those precautions due to spreading those illnesses and sicknesses around. Fourth problem that I've typically had is getting the right amount at the right time per my grass. Okay, so you have to put all this grass into them, hoping that the market stays high and that you can get your profit back out. Now that's why we keep them all the way to beef, so that I can say what the sale price is. Whereas if you bought calves in Ohio in March and you sell them in November, the price is always higher here in March and April, and it's always lowest in November, December. So that would be a bad market. You're buying stock at the highest price to sell it at the lowest price. The only thing that is saving you is that you added weight to them and you're buying per pound. So you're gonna make more profit. You're gonna make profit off of the weight. But if you're paying per pound $1 less in the fall than you bought for in the spring, it's really hard to recoup that amount of money when they're this high priced. So is this, the stocker line, a good line for a guy getting started and who wants to raise his own beef? So if you want to take them and do 2 cells where you're buying the stocker and you're raising it all the way to fat, I think that's fine. But if you're only looking to buy in the spring and sell in the fall, you now know the risks. Now, even with those risks, is this a good model for you? As a beginner, I think it's a fine model. One, you have less risks of death because they're above 400 pounds. They've got some age and some weight behind them where they can handle a little bit more better weather. They're used to being in fences, in fenced-in areas. And so they're not gonna squeeze through or get stuck in a fence typically. They're gonna be able to go through woods better. They're gonna stay in a herd. They've learned how to acclimate to each other. So there's a lot less risk there. The other things come as the ins and the outs of money. In a cow-calf operation, your outs are just holding that cow if you own them. If you have to buy a cow and then hold them, there's a lot of cost there in holding the animal. And the return on a cow-calf operation is much longer. Whereas a stocker operation like this, the return is quicker. It's in the same year, okay? So let's talk about that, and some of that has to do with taxes. When I purchase an item and I resell it, I can deduct the purchase of the item on the sale. That's how taxes work typically. On cattle, I cannot deduct the purchase of the calf until I sell the calf. So if I purchase the calf in 2025, but I sell it in 2026, I've spent a bunch of money on that calf, but there's 0 deductions for the main cost, which is the calf. Now, if you run a stocker operation where you buy and sell in the same year that you're declaring a profit from them, you also get to use that deduction. So it helps you on taxes. The other advantage for a beginner is that you might not have to buy hay or buy in big, large equipment to clean out barns or even have a barn necessarily, because you're buying them in the spring when you don't need a barn and you're selling them mid to late summer or even into the fall, and you don't have to carry them through the winter. No frozen water, give yourself a break. So there are advantages there that make this section of the operations a good thing for a beginner that's trying to get into cattle. So that is the stocker operation. What the stocker operation means, there's lots of other risks, there's lots of other factors, but that's the main gist of what it means to be a stocker, to run a stocker operation. Now it's time for my advice. What do I really recommend? What do I recommend to a guy that only has 10 or 15 acres? He wants to get into cattle. What do I recommend? The thing that's gonna make you the most profitable and make you the best and successful at this is you controlling the most pieces of the market. So when you buy and sell back in the same year, whatever the market tells you you're getting, that's what you're getting. You don't control the price. You're paying for the trucking. You're buying at retail and selling at wholesale, which is not a very good market in business for success. Now you are, if you're doing a good job and you have good pastures, putting weight, that tends to help you. But if you don't have good pastures and you don't know good grass, not controlling the market is really a problem. So what I recommend is the best way is to figure out a way that you control the market. That's why we buy calves from people that we know, not from the sale barn, from one farm. They come here before they go to the sale barn. I pay more than market. Why? Because they're all coming from the same farm And therefore, I don't spread illnesses. They're all the same genetic line. They all come from the same farm. I have less problems. It's worth more money to me to do that. Now, how much more? It ends up being like 50 bucks a head. It's not a lot, but he doesn't have to haul them. He doesn't have to pay a commission at the sale barn, and he knows exactly where they're going. I even have some heifers here on this farm that I have made a verbal contract with that I'm buying it at 400 pounds, but before I butcher her, I have to call him and let her look and give him the option to buy back at the same price that I would sell her to be butchered, but he may want her as a cow later to put back in his herd. So it works really well for me, but I'm controlling the market. I sell the beef. So the problem with that is you have to be able to sell the beef. You have to be able to put weight on animals in a good fashion with the grasses that you have. You have to be able to maintain them for longer than a year. From 450 pounds till butcher ready is about a year and a half if you're only on grass. Or you have to be available to transport grain. And if you're buying it all, it's a risky game there. But if you're raising your own grain, you need to be able to transfer it into feed and feed out grain like that. The last point I'm gonna make on getting started as a beginner is don't buy just one. And I've said this in multiple videos. They are a herd animal. You can see they're going back around the way I didn't want them to go, but they're going back around as I video in a herd. They stay together. And so I recommend at minimum having 3 on your farm. So if you have 5 acres, you might want to look at sheep or something else unless you're only looking at raising beef for yourself. You're not really looking to make a profit in cattle. You're looking to just raise beef for yourself. You could get away with buying 2 at a time, but they need a companion. They're companion herd animals. So buy 3, 6 months later, buy 2 or 3 more, 6 months later, buy 2 or 3 more, and just keep that cycle going. And you'll constantly have a herd like we do with 700, 800, 900 pounders all the way down to 400 pounders. And you're just rotating them in and out like we do here. It has been a good model for us. And we have done this model for about 15 years on some form or shape. Now, if you've watched our channel very long, you're like, I thought you had a cow-calf operation. Well, I do. And we had cows and calves all the way to butcher, the whole line, right? My problem, the reason I got into cow calving was because I couldn't find a good stock of calves to fill a 30-acre farm. And this is just a small section of what we have. So if you have more than 30 acres, understand if you're trying to buy from one farm like us, it's gonna take a good sized farm and a good relationship with that farmer to do that. But if you're a small guy, you have 20, 15 acres in the Midwest, 30 acres in Texas, whatever it would be, and you're looking to do something like this, you can find enough, a farmer local that will sell you 2 or 3 at a time, and that's what I would recommend. If you buy at the sale barn, it's fine. I would treat them. I would give them their vaccines, I would treat them for worms, and I would keep them segregated for a couple weeks when I brought them home. If you do all these things, you listen to people, you have a vet on call, you'll make it, you'll be fine. You're gonna have some losses, you're gonna have some hiccups. It's a learning curve, and your experience, lack of experience that may be, is gonna cost you money at times. But ultimately, there is a way to raise good quality beef, make a little bit of money on the side in this industry. Well, there you have it. That is stockers as an industry. And so I talked a lot about a lot of other stuff to try to help you get started. A big stocker operation, they will buy 100 or 200 at a time. 4 weights and take them back at 6 or 7 or 800 pounds. And it's all about the weight gain and holding that market price. One piece of advice, if you're gonna attempt that, is I would not pass a certain date to sell. So for us, it's like September 1st. If you don't have them gone by September 1st here, after that, the market per pound starts to fall. Now, it's a little bit different the last few years because the market is so high and it is holding so strong. But if we look at the vast last 20, 30 years that I've been around doing things, that tends to be the case overall, which is why when we buy, we tend to buy late in the fall, October, November, even into December. That's where I'll get my best calf prices if I'm not buying from one certain guy. or even when I buy from him, I prefer to buy that late because he sells me just above market price. But know that that's kind of how the industry works. It's all about you buy at this price, you add inputs to them, whether it be grain or hay, and then you take them back and you hope there's a profit there per head. Most stocker operations now are looking at $200 to $300 per head profit is a pretty good year. Well, there you have it. Hope that video helped. Hope that explained that industry, but also gave you some ideas for your small farmer homestead. Please like and subscribe, follow along with us. Please comment down below. If you have questions, if I didn't mention something, if you disagree with something I said, I'm okay to try to help and explain. If you have a long question, feel free to email me. My email is down in the description. We're here for you however we can. Let us know if there's a video you want us to make. We are continuing to put videos out weekly, if not bi-weekly. Trying to do as many as we can here and still run our farm. Until next time, thanks for watching.
Please like the video and subscribe!